Welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 259, and today's date is January 9th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Economy is a Complete Illusion, and It's Ready to Collapse. And I just want to welcome all those new subscribers on YouTube. If you haven't visited the x22report.com site, come on over. I have many things on there. I put Sentinel alerts up there, and I usually comment on these different articles that I put up there. I also have the economic collapse tab that shows an overview of how we're leading up to the economic collapse. I'm trying to create a story with this, and it's dynamic and it keeps changing, and I keep adding things to it. You can also go to the People, which is a forum of like-minded people talking about the economic collapse, and they're talking about many other issues there. It is completely free to join. All you need is a username, a handle, and an email address, and you can go right on and sign up. If you don't want to sign up and you're hesitant, you can go right there and you can just read what everyone is posting and things like that. And again, that's all you need. There is nothing else that is required to join up. Let's get into the economic collapse news, and we're going to head out to the UK. And Greggs, the largest bakery chain in the UK, is now cutting around 400 jobs, and they're chalking this up to restructuring plans for the largest bakery in UK, and this is why they're laying off people. But if we look in different areas, we can see that every single country is having a problem with high unemployment, high debt, austerity. It is just not working. If we look in Cyprus right now, property sales, since the capital controls, since everything has been put in place, property sales have fallen by 23% compared to December of 2012. So from December of 2012 to December of 2013, properties sank by 23%. So they're not selling the properties out in Cyprus. If we look in Greece, what's happening out there is that people cannot pay their taxes. And according to figures released yesterday by the General Secretariat of Public Revenue, a total of 7.5 million properties connected to the electricity grid. The special charge tagged onto power bills for 2012 has not been paid for 1.645 million properties. And this goes on also to say that 200,000 vehicles have not had their 2014 road tax paid, compared to 95,000 vehicles during the last year. So things are completely getting worse. People cannot pay their taxes, and it's getting very, very difficult for everyone to survive. Now, here in the U.S., it's a little different. There is an incredible amount of illusion going on here. The Fed has created an illusion. The government has created an illusion. And you look at the stock market, the stocks are going way, way up. If you look at the corporate media, they are letting us know that this holiday season was pretty darn good. I have some headlines here from CNBC. Retailer sales rise in December. Reuters, discounts drive U.S. holiday retail growth. LA Times, holiday season sale rise, but foot traffic slides. Bloomberg, U.S. holiday sales rise by 3.5%. New York Times, U.S. jobless claims fall. Holiday retail sales rise. Now, these are the headlines that they are putting out, and of course the American public and across the world are looking at it going, oh my God, sales are doing fantastic. They had a great holiday season. And it would make sense, because they have to keep the illusion up, because they brought the unemployment down to 7%, and we understand that more people are falling off unemployment, and we saw from the job data coming out that less people are claiming that they have no work. So they're going to be dropping the unemployment rate probably again, and they have to keep the illusion up that things are going well, and this is why you see the headlines. But let's cut through this and see what's really going on. Well, yesterday we learned that Macy's is closing 5 stores, laying off 2,500 people. Now again, correct me if I'm wrong here. If unemployment is going down and it's getting better, and people have work, that means they have disposable income. Wouldn't retail sales be getting better? Wouldn't stores expand? Because, correct me if I'm wrong again, I remember prior to 2008, when unemployment was low, Stores were expanding. Businesses were hiring like crazy. Housing was selling like crazy. Everything was moving along. Here, we have an illusion. We have an illusion that unemployment is coming down because they manipulated the numbers. But again, we see Macy's, they're saying that they're having problems, and of course they're reorganizing, restructuring, and this is the term that they like to use, and it makes it seem like, oh, they're doing this on purpose. But really, no, that's not really the reason. So let's look at specific stores now of actually what their sales are like, because you look at the headlines and it seems like everything is perfect. Why would you even say that there's a problem? But Barnes & Noble, holiday sales dropped by 6.6%. Sales fell at its bookstores and online during the critical holiday season. That's interesting. H. Gregg, this is an electronics store, just like Best Buy. Their store sales fell by 11%. So things seem a little different right now about how they're telling us the economy's doing, and from the headlines that I just read before. Let's go a little bit further. GameStop, sales declined by 8%. Radio Shack, sales fell by 6%. Bed Bath & Beyond, forecast for the fiscal fourth quarter and full year that ends earlier this year after its third quarter results missed analysts' expectations. Pier 1 Imports downgraded its earnings forecast for the fiscal fourth quarter and the full year, citing a disappointing December. American Eagle Outfitters, sales at stores open at least a year fell 7% in the 9 weeks that ended in January 4th when compared with the same period a year ago. Now, if I remember correctly, a year ago, unemployment was worse. It was around 7.8% during the same time period. Now it's 7%, and now they're saying unemployment's even dipping further down, and they'll probably lower the rate. But let's see what happened. Now, correct me again if I'm wrong here. During the year of 2013, the unemployment rate kept on coming down until we got to the holiday season where it was 7%. That would mean things are getting better. That means things should be expanding. That means stores should be expanding because more people have income. But what do we see? We see store closings. 432 Fashion Bug stores, 250 GameStop stores, 199 Fresh and Easy stores, 189 Barnes & Nobles, 189 The Gap, they're closing, 180 Abercrombie & Fitch, 170 Jones Group, 130 Wendy's, 120 Sears and Kmart's, 70 U.S. Cellular, 63 Build-A-Beer, 56 GNC, 50 Family Dollar Store. So when you look at all this, how can their numbers be correct? Because they're telling us we're recovering. They're telling us more and more people have employment. They're telling us that things are okay. If this is true, then we wouldn't see retail sales collapsing. And of course, the corporate media and the government have to spin it that everything is getting better. And this is the illusion that I'm talking about. They want everyone looking at the stock market. And if you go out and you tell people that things are bad, all they remember seeing are the headlines that I read to you. Sales in December are up. Sales in December have done a lot better. Foot traffic a little bit lower, but sales are great. And this is what they're trying to convince everyone, that the recovery is here and it's happening. And it goes with the same thing with housing. They're doing the same exact thing. There is absolutely no difference. How can mortgage applications be plunging at 66% and housing being in a recovery? It makes no sense. Sales are declining. Yes, they have given money to hedge funds and investors to pump up the market, and they are paying these houses in cash because 60% of the sales are in cash, and this is why we see housing prices move up. Just because housing prices are moving up doesn't mean it is recovering. I've seen housing prices move up in 2007, and then what did we see in 2008? Doesn't mean things are getting better. And if we see that more and more people are getting out of the housing because they can't get into it because mortgage rates are going up, and it's kicking people out, even with 100% financing. And this is why they're introducing adjustable rate mortgages, because they need more people to get into the housing market to keep the bubble going. And that's what it is, and it just won't work because we have to use common sense here, because after the last 2008 crash, there is the foreclosures, there's the short selling, and the people that have no credit left. And don't forget, the Fed is still purchasing all that toxic real estate from the banks, and the banks are using that money to prop up the stock market, and that has not stopped at all. And we can see again that the main mortgage companies and mortgage departments have laid off thousands of people, and this started back in August of 2013. Now, lawmakers are cutting another $9 billion in food stamps. U.S. lawmakers are set to announce a deal on a new multi-year farm bill that would cut $9 billion in funding for the food stamp program over the next 10 years. And we saw what happened the first time. They've given people less in food stamps, and they're going to get less each year for the next 10 years, and this is going to have a huge impact on people. Now, I understand the unemployment extension benefit is being discussed in the Senate and the House. I think the Senate already passed it, and they're still, discussing if they should pass this bill. But if they do not pass this bill, throughout the course of 2014, there's going to be an estimate of around 5 million people who are going to fall off of unemployment. And this is going to bring the numbers down to, just 1.3 million falling off brings it around to 6.5. 5 more million people is going to bring it down into the 5%. And they're going to say, we are completely recovering, but we know this is completely fake. And before this even happens, we are definitely going to see some type of event to take all eyes off the Fed and the government, because they understand what is happening. In my last report, I already discussed that London is ordering these water cannons to protect itself against civil disobedience. And we can see what is happening in the United States and many of the other countries where they're implementing these laws where you can't be protesting and, trying to limit certain things in each one of those countries. Now, since the lawmakers are cutting food stamps, and we know that J.P. Morgan handles the EBT cards. All of a sudden, J.P. Morgan says, you know what? We're going to exit the food stamp business here and other prepaid card businesses, and we're going to get out of it right now. Is that a coincidence? I don't know. Now, recently, there are many financial institutions out there saying that they're going bearish on gold, and gold is going down to around $1,000 an ounce. And if we look at a research paper by Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, they're saying metal still has further to fall in the next year. Their target is around $1,000 per ounce. Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, gold values will be hurt by Fed tapering, a resurgent U.S. dollar, and lack of investor interest in the metal. We expect gold to drop to $1,100 an ounce. UBS is saying it's cutting its 2014 gold bullion forecast to $1,200 an ounce. And the Indian government right now imposed 3 duty hikes in 2013 on the importation of gold bullion into the country. Now, why would they do that? And also, why would gold smuggling into the country increase if gold prices are coming down? Also, the demand for gold bullion is extremely high in other parts of the world. So, again, something doesn't make sense here. Other mints around the world, such as the Perth Mint in Australia and the U.S. Mint, have reported massive increases in the sale of gold bullion coins in 2013. And we understand that the UK Royal Mint ran out of gold coins, but gold is coming down. Now, again, the demand for gold is so high they're running out, but gold prices are coming down. Something doesn't make sense. And when something doesn't make sense and all these bankers and the government are telling you that they're bearish on gold, that means the completely opposite. Because listen to what they're telling you. They're telling you that holiday sales are doing well, that retail sales have gone up. They are telling you to get into stocks. They are telling you to go into the housing market and buy houses. And they're telling you, okay, now we understand the housing market, most 60% of it is purchased through cash from investment companies. 66% mortgage decline in mortgage applications. We understand, I just explained that retail sales are in the dumps. And we understand that the stock market's being pumped up by the Fed. Now, we also understand that they want you to sell your gold. They want you to get out of it. And this is what they do every single time. Remember back to 2007, 2008, 2009. The Fed said they had everything the subprime contained. They told you they're not forecasting a recession in 2008, and they said that in 2008. They said everything is fine. There are no bubbles. There's no stock market bubble. There is no housing bubble. They are saying the same thing right now. Goldman Sachs was selling the subprime securities and betting against it. Again, I mentioned this in my other reports. Goldman Sachs was out there saying they're bearish on gold. They let everyone sell their gold, and this was, I think, in April. And what did they do? As people were selling it, the price dropped. They gobbled it up. What's happening now? Well, they want everyone to get out of gold, and the world's central banks are net buyers of gold bullion now. They are purchasing gold. China is purchasing gold. Russia is purchasing gold. The wealthiest of wealthy are purchasing gold because they understand what is happening. And they always give you the opposite message of what is happening. They're telling you to get into everything that's a bubble. Get into stocks, get into real estate, go back to school, and get into debt. Retail sales are good, so go buy your stuff, take your money out of the bank, and go purchase and put it into the stock market. All of this is to get you into someplace else. And I believe that's what Bitcoin, I know I'm going to get a lot of comments about this, but I do believe this is what Bitcoin is all about, and this is why it's rising so fast, because they want people to get out of the precious metal, and they want people to say, you know what, metals are dropping, Bitcoin's going up, maybe Bitcoin's better, and let me do this. And there are a lot of people that have been doing this, and they are trying to convince you to be in the wrong place. And when the rug is pulled out from everyone, everyone is going to be the loser except those who have silver and gold. Think about in 2008. If you would have purchased gold in 2005, 2006, instead of purchasing the home that was overpriced, instead of putting your money in the stock market, which was overvalued, your gold would have risen during this period. And they realize this, and this is why they're pushing gold down again, because they want everyone out of it. Now, we understand there are many different lawsuits happening against the NSA, and the Justice Department have urged a judge to halt a lawsuit against the NSA spying program. On Wednesday, government lawyers appealed to the U.S. District Court Judge Richard Leon to put court proceedings on hold for two lawsuits against the NSA filed by conservative legal activist Larry Klayman. And we understand that Rand Paul is also creating a lawsuit, and there are other lawsuits that are heading into the Supreme Courts, and it looks like the Obama administration and the Department of Justice are flexing their muscles, and they are trying to push this off because they understand that this is completely unconstitutional and they are really not allowed to do this. And anyway, their whole system is completely null and void and should be dismantled completely. Now, yesterday, I mentioned that every single car in September of 2014 is going to have a black box. And the Ford executives have come out and said, we know everyone who breaks the law thanks to our GPS systems and our black boxes in every one of these cars. Because of our units installed in Ford vehicles, Ford knows when its drivers are speeding and where they are while they're doing it. And this is from the Ford exec. We know everyone who breaks the law. We know when you're doing it. We have GPS in your car, so we know what you're doing. By the way, we don't supply that data to anyone. For some reason, I just don't believe them because we know they are. We know already the NSA has backdoors into every single one of these systems, and they're just collecting all of this information. And again, this information in these systems are going to be used for many different things. It's going to track you. It's probably going to be used for mileage tax. It's already being used for insurance companies to see what type of driver you are, and even if you have no driving if you have no tickets, you have no accidents, they're going to judge you on the way you drive using these devices and then adjust your insurance accordingly. And this is what they are using all of this for. So, if you do a California roll at a stop sign, we're going to have to uptick your insurance by another $20. Oh, look at this. He went through a yellow light as it was turning red. We're going to have to up your insurance from $10 because you're kind of a reckless driver. And we can see that this is turning into some type of police state where you are always tracked, you're always monitored, and they're always making judgments of what you're doing and where you are. And we can see how they are completely taking control of your lives. Now, out in the Ukraine, in my previous reports, we understand that the Ukraine went with Russia and they signed the deal, and as they were about to do this, all of a sudden riots and protests went crazy. McCain went out there and they were stirring up the pot like they always do, and they had all these people out there protesting, go with the EU, go with the EU. And again, Ukraine looked and said, okay, we have Russia, we have the EU. Most of the European Union is in double-digit unemployment. They are in massive debt, and the austerity programs aren't working, and the people are suffering. Or we can go with Russia that doesn't have this. And they looked at this, and, of course, which would you go with? Of course, they went with Russia. And then all of a sudden the protests broke out, EU, 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 and this is from the central bankers, of course. And now the central bankers said, listen, we're still having protests and riots, and if we see the Ukraine government, use any type of violence against the peaceful protesters, the United States will impose sanctions on the Ukraine government. And this is what they did in Iran. And remember, it's always those countries that do not have the central bank, the private Western central bank, in the country and are not using either the euro or the US dollar. So we can see what is happening here. The Ukraine sanctions doesn't have a private Western central bank. We look at Iran, doesn't have a private Western central bank. Syria, Russia, China, North Korea, all of these nations, and this is why you see riots, protesting, and them trying to overthrow the governments, and this is what they do. Now, we understand that the U.S. wants Afghanistan, the government in Afghanistan, to sign the security document which will allow the U.S. troops to stay in Afghanistan. And so far they haven't signed it because the Afghan government doesn't want to sign it, because what they want first is they want the U.S. to conduct night raids under Afghan authority, and Washington does not want to do this because they are breaking every single law known to mankind, and especially all the laws of the United States. They are just raiding anyone's house, going in there, killing people without provocation or the right to do so, and the Afghan government wants to put a stop to this, and they want to be in control of what's going on. But of course the U.S. government doesn't want to work that way. So right now it hasn't been signed. So a senior U.S. commander in Afghanistan says that Washington has no plans to leave the country, while Kabul has not signed a security deal to allow U.S. troops to stay in Afghanistan beyond 2014. So they are not leaving, and the real reason why they're not leaving is because they have natural resources. China's in there helping the Afghan people with their infrastructure. They're mining copper in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is also they're growing poppy fields to create opium to pay for covert operations for U.S. operatives to create riots and protests in the Ukraine. Same thing in Syria, to send weapons over there and to pay for all the Al-Qaeda terrorists that are running around throughout the Middle East. And this is why they don't want to leave. Also, it's a completely fantastic strategical location between the Russian states, and it borders right against Iran. And this is why they are actually never going to leave that area. Now, Libya, the government of Libya, and we have to remember it is a puppet government, they are saying that they will destroy any tanker that pulls up and gets oil from the rebels that have taken charge of certain ports. And again, we have to think why. Why would they just, fire upon or destroy the tanker? Well, because the rebels are not selling the oil using the US dollar. And guess what? The central bankers do not make money if they do this. So they're going to destroy the tanker and not allow them to sell the oil. And this is why they are doing this. Because, again, the people in all of these countries are rising up. They are pushing. They want their countries back. They are pushing their private central bankers out of the country, which is also the U.S. government. And the central bankers always fight back very dirty. And we can see that this is getting worse as time goes on. They are definitely losing control. And I thought today there was a very interesting article that Al-Qaeda controls more territory than ever in the Middle East. And you have to remember, you have to separate in your mind when they talk about Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda are the rebels, are the people of the country who want their country back. But of course, the U.S. government calls them Al-Qaeda, and they're calling them all terrorists. And this is why we have to use drone attacks against these people. But they aren't terrorists. They want their country back because the UN, the United States, the central bankers moved into these countries, pushed out the government, and replaced the government with a puppet government to sell their natural resources using the US dollar. And now what they are actually saying is that the people, the rebels of the revolutionaries of the country are taking over more and more towns and cities, and they have more control of the territories at this point. And like I've been saying, the central bankers, U.S. government, are losing ground in the Middle East, and it's getting worse and worse. And this is why the president wants to send aid there. This is why he's sending military equipment. This is why he's sending troops to train the soldiers of the puppet governments. And this is why it's going to be very difficult to put troops on the ground. And this is why he only can send drones in and have these drone strikes and fire upon like weddings and things like that. And there's a big problem in Yemen. It's a big problem in Libya. It's a big problem in Lebanon. It's a big problem in Iraq. And it is completely spreading throughout the Middle East. Now, the other Al-Qaeda that they like to talk about also is the Al-Qaeda that fights along the Syrian rebels, which is against Assad, of the president of Syria, because the president of Syria does not sell his natural resources using the US dollar as the reserve currency. So Al-Qaeda fighting with the rebels are good Al-Qaeda. And now they're trying to separate the good Al-Qaeda with the bad Al-Qaeda, and this is what they're doing at this point because they got into a corner of calling everyone Al-Qaeda, and everyone is getting confused of, wait a minute, I thought we're fighting Al-Qaeda. Why are we fighting why are we supporting Al-Qaeda? And this is how all the confusion started. So they just pretty much call everyone Al-Qaeda that they need to bomb at this point. And of course, they're really not Al-Qaeda, and they're starting to change the name of Al-Qaeda to, I think it's ISIS or something, the Islamic something or other force. And this is to separate what they're talking about here. Now, there has been a report that there have been 2 attacks on the chemical arms sites in Syria, and I haven't seen any other information at all to see if any of the chemical weapons are missing at this point, but there are continuous attacks on the sites where they're trying to move all the chemical weapons out of the country. And again, like I've said, the economy of the United States is a complete illusion, and we understand that eventually all illusions come to an end because they cannot be supported anymore. And the time is getting close, and they're looking for different ways to cover their butts, basically. And one way they're going to do it is by some type of special event that will occur in this country, which will take all eyes off of the Fed and the U.S. government. They will blame it on another country. They've been building up the propaganda against, think about it, which countries they're building the propaganda against. It's North Korea, it's China, it's Syria, it's Russia, and we can see why they are doing this, because one of these, and Iran, they're still, I mean, now the senators are getting together. I think there's 50 senators now that have, or 52 now, that have been voting for the sanctions against Iran, and we can see this is all going to be blowing up in their faces, where it's going to leave probably the president with only one outcome of this, and that's a military strike on Iran. And before that happens, they have to convince the American people that we have the right to go in and put troops on the ground, because we have to remember they are losing control in the Middle East. And at this point, they cannot put troops on the ground, boots on the ground. They can't do it because the American people do not want war at all, and it has been proven when they tried the false flag with Syria with the chemical weapons. Congress is not up for it. The American people are not up for it. So the only way to get troops into these countries again is with some type of an event. Just like they did with the World Trade Center, all of a sudden they said Osama bin Laden is running to Afghanistan and hiding out in caves, and they had pictures of the caves and the whole thing of where he was hiding and all the different floors under the mountains. And this is how they were allowed to go in there with troops into Afghanistan. But it was completely for a different reason, and that's why we had 9/11. And there were other reasons why we had 9/11, but I'm not going to get into that right now. We also are going to see the same type of thing, because they really need to get back into the Middle East. Africa is another problem. They are bringing troops into the area because the U.S. now is predicting that in Sudan there could be an all-out civil war there, because we have China on one side with the rebels, and of course that's Al-Qaeda, and then we also have the puppet government on the other side in Sudan. And again, both fighting for the natural resources of these countries. And this is why the EU is putting together a force to go into Central Africa, and we can see all of this happening at the same time. And the only way that the U.S. is going to be able to get more armed forces in this area is to have some type of event. And of course this event will help in many different ways. It will cover up the collapse that is coming, and they will be able to take the blame off the Fed and the U.S. government and put it on another country. It will allow the U.S. government to send troops over to whatever country they pick to have this happen. It could be multiple countries, who knows? And this is what's going to happen. This will allow them, because we saw papers out there with the IMF that want to go and take 10% of everyone's money from the banks. They have already created the bail-in documents throughout the country. So they're all, and everyone's like, oh, why are they doing this? Because they are prepping for what is coming. They do it very slowly, they do it very methodically, and they continually do this. They enact each law, pretending like it's for something different, and they put it in place. The FDIC Bank of England. Oh no, Cyprus isn't a template, but of course it was, because then the Eurozone, Australia, Canada, Switzerland, the UK, all got the same type of document for bail-in. Okay? And we can see them doing this each time. Each time here in the U.S., DHS, purchases billions of rounds. DHS gets 2,700 tanks. They put laws up there for protesting. They're trying to get the weapons and disarm the American people. And the president continually writes executive orders all throughout time. And this is all leading up to one thing, and that is the collapse of the economy and to control the populations of every single country. Because think about it, when this collapses, what happens? People go a little crazy when they lose their entire wealth. We saw it happen in 1929. People were jumping from buildings, committing suicide. And if they realize who is responsible for this, guess what's going to happen? They're going to have millions of people storming Washington, and they know this. The people in the United Kingdom realize this. The mayor of London realizes this. This is why they have water cannons on order. In other countries, in Japan, they have the secrecy laws and other laws being put in place because they understand what is happening. They are building up an EU force to span across Spain, Portugal, Italy to control the populations of all these countries when they riot. And this is what is happening right now because this entire economy is a complete illusion. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.